I'll just center myself a little more. There we go.
Cool. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ecosomatics podcast once again. I'm Chandler Stevens, and tonight I'm really excited meeting with Dr. Jeff Haller, who is a Feldenkrais practitioner and director of the Feldenkrais Training Academy, which is totally just groundbreaking program. I'm really excited to hear more about and learn more about. And Jeff actually has a really unique look on the method that I don't hear too many people talking about. And we met on a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I was blown away from the very start. So Jeff, thanks for taking the time. It's a pleasure to be meeting with you again.
It's my pleasure. Great pleasure, actually. I really enjoyed our first conversation, so let's carry on.
It was a good one. Yeah, let's dig in.
Yeah, let's just go for it.
Shoot. So for people that aren't super familiar with what the Feldenkrais method is and what it entails, could you give, it's hard to give it a nutshell kind of summary, but what's your take on it? That's really probably the hardest thing we have to deal with in the Feldenkrais world is to talk about what the method is. Mm-hmm. Just trying to figure out what route I should take at this point in time. Maybe a brief little bit of background as to who Moshe Feldenkrais was, and then we can sort of see where that leads us. Perfect. Yeah, because his life reads a bit like a spy novel at times too, and so that might be a...
Well, you stop to think that the man was born in 1904 in the Ukraine, what's now the Ukraine. It was in a part of Russia called the Pale, actually, where the Jewish settlers settled. He lived in a town called Baranovich, and at the age of 14 with the Balfour Declaration, he started to walk from Baranovich across Europe, joined up with a group of other kids. They all walked down, about 400 of them, down to the tip of Italy, caught a ship and ended up in Palestine and became the laborers that really built the Opera House, built the synagogue, built the main synagogue in Tel Aviv, started building the housing settlements. And at the age of 22 or 23, he finally finished his high school degree. And he'd proven himself to be a brilliant student living in the Ukraine. And of course, he was trained in yeshiva, and he was trained at the highest level of Jewish academia at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And so he was trained how to think. One of the things that's most interesting about the Jewish or the yeshiva system is in 1 year they learn to argue a point. The next year they learn to argue against that point. The third year they learn to argue against the previous 2 points, until one becomes fluent in the ability to see and argue from all points of view. Mm-hmm. And of course they're studying the Talmud. And the Talmud is a series of discussions about particular biblical phrases that different rabbis have different takes on. And so, it was funny. There was in 1983, I was in Moshe's house. It's a long story how I got there, but he was bedridden at that point in time after having had a stroke. And there was this book up on this bookshelf. And I said, Moshe, what's that book? And he says, oh, it's the finest physics book in the world. And I took the book down, and it happened to be the Talmud. He said, I brought it with me from Russia when I came. And I read it by the time I was 13.
Wow.
So here's this guy who's arrived in Palestine. He's become a laborer. At one point in time, he dislocates his left knee playing soccer. And the doctors at that point in time wanted to operate to amputate his leg because they thought he'd be better off with a prosthesis than as badly injured as his knee was. Mm-hmm. And he said no, and it took about 10 months. He recovered, and he began to, and he figured out basically he taught himself how to walk again.
Well, and so just to wedge something in there, at some point leading up to that, he developed a mode of self-defense as well, right?
Yeah, he was a member of, he was basically a Jewish terrorist. He was a member of the Haganah. Mm. And they had no means to protect themselves because they were either fighting against the Arabs or they were fighting against the British.
Mm-hmm.
The British did always a good job of divide and conquer, and so that they would create the situations where the different factions would fight against themselves, and they would keep rule over them.
Mm-hmm.
And Moshe lost one of his cousins in one of these street fights that they would have, and he started to notice that the Arabs all attacked always the same way, with knives, with an overhand attack.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized that in those days there was no time for them to train. In martial arts, you spend hours and hours and weeks and months and years to learn to train away the first reflexive action, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you can have the option to meet whatever happens to you in a potent way, and the ability to meet. The founder of Aikido said, he called it Takimusu Aiki. Moriehe Yashiba. They called it Takimusu Aiki. It means in Aikido what's the term? There's no technique, only unlimited creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, you spend years and years and years, just like a jazz musician, just like any martial artist. You spend time with kata. You spend time learning the scales. Spend time learning the principle-based movement. You learn the same thing when you watch really high-level basketball. You watch teams move out of set plays into principles of action.
Mm-hmm.
So they understand and they move with principles. And Moshe's main principle was, what's good posture? Good posture is the freedom to move without hesitation in any direction, without making any preliminary preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pure martial arts, and it's also pure freedom in that particular regard.
Mm-hmm.
So Moshe, you can just look at this guy. He's in situations that try to kill him over and over and over again. Living in Baranovich, in his hometown, there were at least 3 armies of occupation in the town before he was 14 years old. There was a period of time when, at the age of around 14, when he lost his voice. And there was a reason he lost his voice, because he spent his time hiding in basements and hiding in places and you couldn't say a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so he had psychosomatic illnesses. And at some point in time, these things, these processes where he has to find the means within himself that, he says at that age, he had such a sense of inferiority because of, and that inferiority is basically a profound sense of anxiety and insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does a kid like that recover his voice? Now, here's Moshe's brilliance. He says, I looked within myself and I found what it was that I could do perfectly. There were things he could do scholastically. There were things in his body. There were things that he could do that were so well ingrained with him that he didn't have to think about them. There was a quality of perfection. And we have the same thing, the way we brush our teeth, or something that's implicit in the way that we've inherited acquired our behavior. There are things that we know that we do really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I took the quality of what I could do perfectly and I began to bring that into the rest of my life.
Huh.
At 14 years old.
I was not doing that at 14 years old.
No, nor I. I'm not hardly doing it at 69 years old.
With years and years of the method. Yeah, that's...
I mean, that's really the profound art that we have for living, and just to, I mean, we could spend hours on who Feldenkrais was, and we could see how he developed his method, but eventually he went on to he left Israel. He taught himself calculus when he was sick at one point in time, and became the surveyor for the British mandate in Palestine, and then eventually went on to the Sorbonne and he got degrees in electrical engineering and physics, graduating first in his class. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he ended up in the laboratory of the Curies when he was their lab assistant when they won the Nobel Prize.
Yeah,
and of course, the Curies were noted for their work with radioactive materials, and so he, with the Nazi occupation, with the Nazis coming into Paris to occupy Paris, he carried suitcases with heavy water and the lab notes from the Curie's laboratory. And it was interesting because when in addition to that, he'd also met up with Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo, and he began studying judo and studied 6 or 7 days of judo because Kano left a sixth degree black belt for him to study judo with. And he started the Judo Society of France. So here's this guy with this wide-reaching situation and having had significant injuries as he went along the way and kept finding his way out of it. The thing that really began to make this method, though, were a couple of instances. When he was fleeing Paris with his wife and the notes from the Curie's laboratory, his left knee that had not bothered him in all those years, swelled up. And he couldn't figure out why his knee swelled up. Right? That what was the anxiety? What was the fear? What was the internal state that led him to have the psychosomatic relationship that his knee swelled up when it hadn't bothered him for years of practicing judo? And later, when he was in Scotland, he fell on a submarine deck because he was doing research on sonar for submarines. And he fell on a submarine deck and damaged his knee again. And it was those questions that he really began to say, okay, how can I find the internal means to organize myself again? Now, he was a physicist. He had done the derivatives on all of the major judo throws. He had figured out the force vectors, how the throw could be the most efficient movement possible. Right? He'd figured out the mass, the acceleration, the momentum. He'd figured out all the things in these kind of ways. And so he had an innate, clear understanding, besides having spent all the years he did as a laborer, and he was a hod carrier. What does that mean? He meant that he had a bar on his shoulders with the mortar to carry up and down the stairs in the opera house when they were building the opera house. So he was going up and down the flights of stairs with 200 pounds of stuff on his shoulders all day long, day after day after day. So here's an immensely strong man and a brilliant man, and he at some point in time, and in a world that continually tries to kill him, and not only does he survive it, but he starts to figure out how in the world can I create a way for myself and for others to help them with the difficulties that they have. Now, to jump ahead a little bit, the war was over. He spent some more time in England, and then when he moved to Israel, he began to develop this work that we call awareness through movement. Now, awareness through movement here's where the Feldenkrais method starts to really form itself. So the Feldenkrais method, in that sense, is a process by which a person begins to investigate how they function in the world. When we look really carefully, really carefully, we can say that a human being, intrinsic within a human being, is the ability to learn. Yeah. Last week, there was a baby deer in my yard. It was a cute little baby deer, just kind of splayed legs and starting to figure out how his legs were going to move. It was probably born in the green space that's just next to my house. And an hour later, there was a bobcat in my yard.
So that deer knows how to get away from said bobcat.
That deer has implicit within it, integral within it, the architecture, the internal architecture to be a deer. Every dog around the world knows every other dog. Every dog in the world knows how to communicate with every other dog. Every cat knows what a cat is. Every other animal that's similar to them, they all know how to be the animal, and every one of them has within it in their own genetic architecture. They already have within them what it is to be that animal. Right? We don't have that.
Yeah, and they don't have the forces of culture shaping that behavior in certain ways as well.
They don't have a prefrontal cortex that makes discriminations. That's our human advantage, this prefrontal cortex and its capacity to make discriminations. So, but we have a really, really long apprenticeship to gravity. Yeah? You know about that. That's what your work is being related to gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not only do we have to learn how to organize ourselves in gravity, we learn how to organize ourselves in gravity relative to our culture, the society we're in, the family that we're in, and every single experience we have is somehow inculcated into the way that we come to know ourselves. In other words, we can say that we're conditioned by the field of gravity.
So I'm curious, could you clarify what you mean, the way that we come to know ourselves? What does that entail?
Well, if we really watch human behavior, really watch it closely, then we can see that a person, in order to survive, they have to be able to get the attention that they need. They have to take care of the survival needs they have. And these are the big generality, but for the most part, people's sense of well-being is based on the outcome and the results they can produce. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In other words, the question of skill versus will. Yeah. Now, so for example, I'll give you a story. Yeah, I worked with a woman not long ago, beautiful woman in her early 50s, truly an athlete, had been playing soccer at a high level for years and years and years, and her left leg has been so damaged that it's kind of off kilter about 15 degrees to the outside. Mm-hmm. And she's still wanting to run and play soccer, but she can't even hardly walk. And she's not really ready to have a knee replacement. Mm-hmm. Now, she's identified with playing soccer as a sense of her well-being.
Yeah.
That's how she identifies herself, right? Now, few of us know what it is to really care for ourselves. We know how to care for the sense of ourselves that's been conditioned. That deeply internalized sense of ourselves, the way we walk, the way we move, the way we've adapted ourselves. That's how we know ourselves. That's how we perceive ourselves. That's our perception of who we are. Feldenkrais says it really simply. We act in accordance with our self-image, and that self-image in turn governs our every activity. Mm-hmm.
So we work more in service of the self-image than the self itself, whatever that may be.
Whatever that might be. Now, of course, we can go Buddhist on this, and self, no self, and we can have that argument too. But let's just keep it simple for a moment, because I hope that this is okay. This conversation, because I want it to be fluid enough. Mm-hmm. So the woman, I give her a couple of lessons, and she comes to the place where she can stand and walk, and she's relatively comfortable. Now, a lesson means that I work with her hands-on. And I help her help her tune her attention into the capacity that she has, this prefrontal capacity to make distinctions. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's a difference between a structural view and a functional view of how we interact with gravity. A structuralist, a Rolfer, for example, is going to say, unless you change a person's structure, their function won't change. Mm-hmm. A Feldenkrais practitioner is going to say, if you teach a person to function, their structure will change. Mm-hmm. The question of form versus function. And without gravity, there's no reason to function. Therefore, no reason to have a structure. There are newts and salamanders that live in dark places that don't have eyes. Mm-hmm. There are fish in the bottom of the ocean, unless they have their own lighting system, that don't have eyes. They don't need eyes. There's no reason in their structure.
There's no demand for it. Yeah.
There's no demand. So they don't need to have the cells be developed so that they can live in that environment. Mm-hmm. So Moshe, when he would argue with Ida Rolf, that would be the argument, was that form follows function. The necessity for the ability to function is what creates the means within ourselves to organize in a neuromuscular way, in a neurophysiological way, the motor activity that we need to be able to produce that function relative to the environment.
Yeah, well, and that seems to play out both in an evolutionary context and embryologically, the development seems to follow a functional path.
Every child who has no particular neurological limitation walks. Mm-hmm. But every single child's path to walking is unique. Mm-hmm. Every single person has adapted themselves to the environment through the stages of development that bring them to walking in their own unique way. No other child goes through the path that they have. And every single person's walking is adapted and maladapted in their own unique way. And no one perfects it. Every child does just good enough to get to whatever is interesting to them. But it's not until, and today we see these people taking function into such high levels. You can see the X Games, you can see where the stunts have gone. You see what you guys are doing in parkour and the different things that are taking place with people really, really probably adapting and utilizing the body much closer to the way, certainly in the way relative to the environment, to the body is complexly organized to be able to interact with the environment. Mm-hmm. But the question, I mean, from the Feldenkrais point of view is, how do we study function? How do we actually come to the place where we internally shift our attention out of the will, out of the effort, out of trying, out of making the activity in order to produce some outcome and result by which we can say, "Oh, good boy, aren't I wonderful?" Mm-hmm. Because the third session I had with this woman, if we could go back to that, she comes in and after she'd gotten to the place she could walk comfortably. So what does she do?
She goes and runs.
She goes and plays. She gets called to play a game of soccer. They don't have enough players. She plays all 80 minutes. And she's completely hobbled in really, really deep pain. So I give her another lesson. And during the lesson, and as she gets up from the lesson is one that is profoundly quiet. Because when we work in the Feldenkrais method, again, this is a lot of neurophysiology, but the prefrontal cortex, in order to make discriminations, you can't make discriminations if there's a lot of loud noise in the background. Mm-hmm. You can't make really, really clear discriminations if you have a lot of mental activity going on. You can't make really, really neat, really refined discriminations if your limbic system, your emotional system, is overwrought. Mm-hmm. If you're really angry, if you're in a real mood, it's very difficult to do something. You wouldn't want to be building a watch and be angry.
There's a lot going on in there. Yeah. A little too much for the fine distinctions.
Right. You wouldn't want to be, cutting a diamond apart. Mm-hmm. That takes really, really, really highly, highly refined skills. Mm-hmm. Real dexterity in that particular definition of dexterity, which means I mean, I don't want my dentist to be in a bad mood.
Ooh, no. When you say a quiet session, this isn't like auditory stimulus quiet. This is the entire organism.
Yeah, exactly. I'm working. She's lying on a table where she's supported. Her anti-gravity musculature is quiet, and I'm lifting her, holding her, supporting her, giving her information into her nervous system that she's really paying attention to. And what's interesting is and it would be fun. I mean, you could refer people to the website, the article or the thing with Dorothy of the ballet dancer, if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could.
We'll link that in the show note. It's worth digging into.
Yeah, so that people can have an idea of what in the hell we're talking about when we're seeing a lesson. Mm-hmm. But this lesson with this woman, and she gets up and she looks at me and she says, "I have never been so happy in my life." In other words, she'd gone into a completely different zone with herself.
Yeah.
But she says, "But what am I going to do?" Now, because her life is built on and knowing herself through doing.
Yeah.
She doesn't know the paradigm of what it is to be in the place where she really comes to simply enjoying her own life, her own self, her own being, her own way of being present with herself. The profound kind of quality of just pleasantly being with yourself for a few moments. Because she's going to, if you give her that kind of open-ended space and that spaciousness. Now, happiness is intrinsic within you as well. You think of the emotions of every animal. Have you ever seen a golden retriever who sees its owner? What does that butt do?
It's hard to not call that happiness. Yeah.
That dog is joyous. Yeah, not all dogs, but again, when we look at, in other words, it's a part of our emotional state. Joy is a part of our emotional state. Joy is not found by what you do. Joy is uncovered within yourself.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't just do joy.
Right. But you have to you have to uncover it. You have to reduce for yourself the way that you habitually maintain tension, anxiety, insecurity, the will to survive, the will to thrive. All of that is a particular way in which you know yourself, and we can call that a muscular habit. Now, if you compulsively live that, that's simply neurosis.
Yeah.
Yeah? And now the Feldenkrais method is a process by which we unwind you out of that neurosis, out of that compulsion, to help you understand what it is like to have choice within yourself.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that drew me to the work you're doing with the Feldenkrais Training Academy in particular, is the emphasis is clearly, we could construe the Feldenkrais method as a movement modality sometimes. And yet there's a lot more going on within than simply moving better.
You just froze.
To diminish moving better. Oh, I froze.
Well, I don't know. It might be, mine might be unstable too, but it's okay.
We'll keep going.
Well, in general, the Feldenkrais method is generally thought of as gentle movements to help people move with greater ease and greater comfort. That's the general view in the world of what the Feldenkrais method is. But the Feldenkrais method can be taken into a much deeper interpretation. In other words, we utilize the capacity of the brain to make distinctions, and the distinctions we're making are between the sensory cortex and the motor cortex. So that as the person begins to sense in the first beginning movement, to use their sense to sense, how did I organize this movement? And then to take a moment, and because the lessons invite you to inhibit what you've done and look at doing something else until you can do something that you've never done before. That actually means learning, that you learn something new in a new complex way, and eventually you unfold for yourself a more complete idea of what's possible for yourself. A more complete self-image, a more complete way of moving in a whole way within yourself. Building into your self-image aspects of your body, aspects of your architecture that you just are not seen as a part of yourself in the way that you've developed yourself.
And so this is essentially introducing new paths to do what may have been compulsive habits before, and that starts to remap this self-image we have. Absolutely.
And therefore, and in the process of that silence, that place between sensation and movement, in that place of inhibiting an old habit, a really, really well-established habit within yourself, so that something new that can take place, there's also a profound sense of internal freedom, goodwill, a sense of composure, a sense of harmony. For example, what would your face be like if you had no anxiety and no insecurity? What would your breath be like?
No anxiety.
What would your breath be like? just pay attention to the tension that when you think of just the very nature, that fine fabric that stays a tension within yourself when you're just a little bit, the will's still there, and it's really completely different than the composure of just being simply deeply with yourself. Mm-hmm. Now, we all experience this, but we don't know the value of it. Because our value, and for the most part, is based on whether we succeed, whether we produce, whether we get good grades, how fast we learn, how quickly we get attention, how well we are at attracting a mate. All the different biological things that people do in order at first to survive. And those are absolutely crucial for us. Mm. But at some point in time, when our survival is taken care of, and we can ask the question, what's next?
That opens up a can of worms for a lot of people. Yeah.
It opens up a huge can of worms. But for the most part, look at a midlife crisis. What is that really? Here I've taken care of myself with my financially. I've developed my family. I play golf 6 times a week. I've made countless loops around the golf course, or whatever it is that people do ad infinitum to give themselves a sense of meaning. Mm-hmm. And eventually they find that there's something empty within themselves. And what do they go looking for? Well,
something to fill the void.
Yes, but in some cases, and let me give another example, because I recently gave a workshop in Washington, D.C. There was a lawyer in the group, and I gave a particular kind of awareness to movement. Not all lessons are like this, but again, this was a lesson that brought this individual into a profound state of composure and being really collected. Just very, very whole and deeply integrated within himself. And you can just see the shock on his face. And he comes up to me after the lesson and he says, look, I'm a lawyer. I do in a special interest group. And my group, we meditate every day after lunch. But I never get to this place in my meditation. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, we live in an age where the things that are interesting, there are countless people that are seeking some kind of solace and stress reduction and these kind of things through mindfulness meditation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a huge need for this. Yeah. But when we really, really look deeply, again, at the question of what's meditation, it cannot be meditation if there's a goal in it. Mm-hmm. The very nature of trying to produce something out of the meditation is in and of itself completely counter to the very nature of meditation. Mm-hmm. Because you can read Suzuki Roshi in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and he says it very succinctly. If you seek anything as a result of meditation, it's not meditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Meditating for stress relief is not meditation.
Right. Now, people in order to find some kind of relief from the travails that they've had emotionally, they seek therapy, or and they work with a therapist. Again, a perfectly valid thing to do, because people who are looking to meditate are looking to having a space between the way that they acquired their mind and a sense of peace. People who have a particular kind of internal freedom. People who are in therapy are looking for some kind of separation from the way that they've been wounded. Mm-hmm. So they can come into a kind of a composure and peace. Mm-hmm. The question then becomes, well, so what are the advantages of this work relative to those processes? People engage in yoga and Pilates and Qigong and Tai Chi and Aikido and all the different arts and parkour, and in one sense, for some kind of outcome, to look a particular way, to feel a particular way, to have a particular freedom, a way of being organized and integrated within their body, but it's all because they're not comfortable with, generally, because is it truly creativity? Is it true spontaneity? Or is it there's a form that they're acquiring?
Yeah.
And are they identified with the form? Mm-hmm. Again, we can go to the Tai Chi classics, and there's a statement in the Tai Chi classics that basically says, and I could get the real quote for you, but it basically says an error of an inch is equal to an error of 1,000 miles. Mm-hmm. That means that the first day you step into the court to study Tai Chi, and you become involved in trying to refine the form, in 20 years' time, you'll be 1,000 miles away from the essence of Tai Chi. Yeah? Because the study of the form is not to be involved in the place where the form arrives within you. What? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's O-sensei. He's again saying, in Aikido, there's no technique, only unlimited creativity. Feldenkrais came up with the phrase, a good posture is the freedom to move in any direction without hesitation or preparation.
Well, and so what it seems like we're looking for in all of these different modalities and methods is not a form, as you said, to kind of glom onto or hide behind or cling to as safe, but it's the freedom to exist in the spaces between those forms as well.
I think the true process is to recognize what's profoundly intact within us. It's our nature to learn. Yeah, it's our nature. It's inherent within us. The question is how do we live in the environment so learning is available to us, rather than being a human doing something to acquire behavior so that you have a sense, and to use that as a sense of your well-being, as opposed to enjoying the process of yourself and watching it, what spontaneously begins to emerge if the creativity begins to flow. Right?
That makes a lot of sense. And in my own experience with awareness through movement lessons, with functional integration sessions, it's very process oriented. You have no idea where you're going to end up. You just trust that you're going to end up somewhere and somehow.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just gave a talk to a naturopathic college here in the Seattle area called Bastyr College. And so I gave the students a little short demonstration of awareness through movement. Yeah. Now, in that school, because of its nature, it's a naturopathic college, the naturopaths do what? They study yoga, they study qigong, they study acupuncture, they study meditation. Yeah. And I brought the point up to them in the sense that when you do an awareness through movement lesson, you have no idea where you're going. The entire point of an awareness through movement is to arouse curiosity and novelty and imagination, the highest of human functions, to arouse it within you, and to not have any idea of where you're going, but to play inside yourself in the dance between sensation and movement, and to watch within yourself how you keep trying to get it right, even though you have no idea what in the hell you're doing.
You don't know what right is. You don't know what the metric is. Yeah. Right.
But you can't help but compare yourself with the other students in the class when you're in an awareness to movement lesson, because there's some way in which within us we seek to be appropriate. We seek to be a part of. But to actually go through our own unique experience. And Feldenkrais, in one of his lectures he gave, he taught 2 training programs in the United States, one in Amherst and one in San Francisco, and I was a part of the Amherst training program. And at one time he said, what's the difference between exercises and learning? Now, the difference between exercises is if you go through these awareness through movement lessons as exercises in order to achieve an outcome or to find an answer, so that you'll have something within yourself that you're going to be able to carry on to give yourself some sense of well-being, that result of that lesson will last about 5 minutes.
Surface level. Yeah.
Surface level. But if you really, really capture the essential process that we go through in the awareness to movement lesson, you really capture that within yourself, you'll have that for a lifetime. If you really, really know how to pay attention to living in distinctions and noticing differences, and that process becomes of greater value, and to tasting, wow, in this movement, I found that my breath became held at the moment that I started the movement, rather than, wow, my head's now free, my breath is free, I'm standing with a particular quality, there's a sense of wholeness to my activity. Now, I can do that on one side, but I don't do it on the other side. Or I find myself always going to this side, but I can't find myself and bring that to the other side. Mm-hmm. We go back to Moshe's learning how to talk again. I can find something that I do well, and yet I force myself in a way through the other side, and I skip over. I find it uncomfortable. I skip over because I never find the quality of being able to move from one point to the other. I can't transfer the quality from one side to the other. Mm-hmm. Now, if I know the process, I don't care the outcome. I can stay in the process for hours. Mm. I can stay curious in the process for hours. I can lie on the floor and begin to roll from one side to the other and find that in one side I can roll with complete ease, as if every part of my surface knows how to roll, and I have this sensation that it's sequential, that it's composed, that it's like it's mine. And I roll to the other side and it's clunky and it's chunky. And I can tell you that if I was playing basketball or if I was doing martial arts, if I was doing anything, that I would have such a preference in myself that my default would be that preference, and I wouldn't know how to actually make the refinement to the other side.
Yeah. If
I take the hour on the floor and I can make that discrimination, I will find all of a sudden that when I'm carving turns, when I'm skiing, or in my martial arts class, or when I'm playing basketball, all of a sudden I can find myself doing something or in dancing or whatever. I'll find something begin to open up inside of myself. It's like I've entered into a world of possibility that I wouldn't have had before, because the implicit, hidden patterns of behavior that have been held with me ever since I was crawling, mm-hmm. that I built all my behavior on.
And they make themselves manifest in every arena within your life.
That's why the whole idea of strengthening your core is such a silly idea. Well, because what are you going to do? You're going to strengthen your core based on the patterns that you live within. Mm-hmm. So you'll perfectly strengthen your imperfection.
You start to reinforce the right. maladaptations right. you have. Yeah.
Right. And unless there are questions asked to you and small little demonstrations shown to you, you won't even know how to find these imbalances, these maladaptations, this asymmetry within yourself. Mm. Now, for your survival, you need to have the asymmetry, because your system has to go down to a default movement that it will use to survive. Mm-hmm. Biologically, you must have a default. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Something's coming at you in a hurry, you have to get out of the way, you better have a default.
You don't want to have to think that through. I better engage my core and I better engage my glute. And
right.
Yeah.
Right. But for biological fitness, you need to have the ability to move in every direction without hesitation. And the question is, how will you study that? Now, you cannot study it with power. You can't study it with hard effort.
So let me ask you this kind of organismic curiosity, is it safe to assume that within a healthily functioning human animal that we have this kind of curiosity innate to us?
It's innate. It's absolutely innate to us. It's inherent within us. Mm-hmm. But our conditioning, the way the world is conditioned, is so deeply ingrained within ourselves. Mm. I bet you that do you still have a relationship with your parents or your father?
Yeah.
Great. So how long does it take when you're in yourself and in your own studio and you're playing and you're pretty intact with your sense of yourself? How long does it take when you're around your father before you start walking like him? We click into the same patterns, or I click into his pattern pretty quickly. Yeah. Yeah. In other words, you had a really long apprenticeship in a very close and intimate situation. I found it for years. I would be with myself. I'd be studying Aikido. I'd be doing the Feldenkrais Method. I'd be working with myself really, really hard. And then I would go play golf with my father. And within 100 yards on the first hole, I'd be walking like him. Huh. It was so deeply ingrained with me. I would just, the environment and my father, and it would take me into a neurological state that was before all the learning. And until I could actually catch myself beginning to engage in it, I had no choice. Mm-hmm. This is exactly the main tenet of the Alexander technique. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because Alexander, when he was working with himself, he was a Shakespearean actor. Yeah. And he used to do one-man performances. And at some point in time, he began to lose his voice. And he did all the things medically. He was an Australian man. And he did all the things medically that he could do. And then finally, one day, he's sitting in front of a mirror, and he notices that when he's rehearsing, that he would change his head and he would put a strain on his voice. And so he began to rehearse in front of a mirror so that he could do all of his performances in a completely different way, organize his head, and he created this whole thing of having a long, wide back and having the tail drop and the head be long.
Head
and all,
forward and up and
all the things that he had said, right? Now, again, this is a form, but that's not the most important thing, because the very first time he went back to performance, as soon as he went to performance, he immediately went back to the old habit. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until he could suspend his habit, suspend the muscular habit. That's what the main tenet of the Alexander process is to get people to the point where they can notice within themselves how they initiate activity. Yeah, that's the main tenet of the Feldenkrais method. That's the main tenet of any martial art. That's the main tenet of any of them. But that's the main tenet of meditation. Mm-hmm. How do I stay so clearly in my practice? Inhale, count 1, exhale, count 2, and have my attention completely on that in such a way that I can suspend my habit of utilizing my acquired mind. Mm-hmm. How quickly do I notice that my mind I begin to drift and become engaged in the way that my historically am involved with my thinking?
Mm-hmm. How quickly do I slip back into that groove that I've worn so well? Yeah.
And how deeply grooved is it? It's profoundly grooved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so where's the quality of my life in that? I'm in a situation, and I see that my attitude is continually affected by the situation. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, let me give you another example of this. It's common in the world of psychotherapy today to talk about being triggered by the environment, by triggered by something that takes place, by being hijacked. Something that takes place that hijacks me emotionally. That's pretty common today, right?
Hijacks the amygdala. Yeah.
I have a client who, as a result of an automobile accident, again, this is. The Feldenkrais method isn't generally thought about in these ways. It's
in therapeutic ways, you mean?
Yeah, they're thought about. The questions of physical integrity are the main ideas that people think about the Feldenkrais method. They don't think about emotional dignity as a part of the method, and they don't think about health as a part of the method. Mm-hmm. You have to have a different idea of what's health. A healthy individual is someone who has the resources to meet the stream of life that's coming towards us with all its complexity and uncertainty in such a way that you can swim through it and thrive. That's a healthy individual.
To be able to regulate no matter what's coming your way, no matter what stresses are on you.
Right. And to find the enjoyment of your own life within the situation. It's your own attitude. Whose attitude is it? So this woman who, when she came to me, couldn't even think of opening the front door of the passenger seat of her car and looking at it. She couldn't think of it without being in a state of terror. Mm-hmm. So she's completely phobic about sitting in the front seat of her car. Now, in a few sessions of working with her, she finds, again, this kind of composure within herself where her breath is nice, her muscle tone is evenly distributed. She has a sense of being calm, peaceful, And she can begin to imagine that she could sit in the front seat of a car.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In fact, she gets to the place where she goes to Hawaii and she's sitting in the front seat of the car with her husband driving on Maui. And if you've been on Maui in any recent time in years, the traffic is horrendous. And she comes back to me and says that I had a great trip except for when my husband was driving, because every time the red lights came on, I would experience terror.
Yeah.
And in other words, she said the lights triggered me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, that's not accurate. I mean, it's accurate to her as to what she experienced. But being triggered is like when someone pulls the trigger of a gun, you can't unpull it.
Mm-hmm.
A bullet that's been shot can't be unshot.
Yeah.
A neurological system that reacts to the environment in a compulsive way is not a healthy nervous system.
If it only has that one direction out.
It only has that one way.
Shit, I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and this is a woman who comes in every single time with her makeup immaculately set. Her face is always, her eyebrows, her lipstick, the way that she's colored her face around her, it's always immaculate.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to her, look, every single time you come to me and your makeup is perfect. In other words, you really know how to pay attention to details. You know how to pay attention moment by moment by moment to what you're doing, because you don't make mistakes in the way that you apply your makeup.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you really know how to pay attention moment by moment. Is there anything else that you do moment by moment? She says, I'm really a great cook. And she says, I love to be in the moment of tasting food and determining if the spice level is correct. So she has another set of senses that she knows how to be moment by moment. I said, what else do you do well? She says, I'm really good at organizing meetings, business meetings for my colleagues. Moment by moment, she knows how to meet the exigencies of whatever's going to come up. So this is a woman who's a highly skilled professional woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say to her, then you need to be able to sit in the car moment by moment by moment and attend to the details so that you can find that within yourself the means that the same quality of composure you have when you put on your makeup, because you can't do that when you're overly thinking or you're in a hurry or you're emotionally unstable. You can't do that. You can't do it like that. So what do? She says, well, I do it in a state of real calm. Of course you do.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is, how can this woman transfer this quality within herself into this most difficult area of her life? Now, she's not going to be able to do that unless she has intact within herself what it's like to really be calm so that she can refer to it.
Mm-hmm. She needs to know the contrast so that she can start to learn. Yeah.
And she has to, so when she comes for her lessons, she has to be able to stand well in such a way that her musculature is doing the work to make it simple to stand. Mm-hmm. She has to be able to walk in such a way that she feels that the ground supports her and that she can move from place to place with real elegance. Mm-hmm. She has to have a profound sense of internal dignity. She has to have a sense that she's almost regal in her bearing. Yeah. Now, if I can create the conditions where she discovers these innate qualities for herself, then when she's in the car, she at least has something profound to return to as a comparison for herself.
Mm-hmm. She has a reference point.
Right. If she doesn't have the reference point, there's no way in the world that she's going to be able to untrigger herself, so to speak.
So she needs almost a home base to kind of come back to and ebb and flow out of that. Uh-huh.
And here again we have it, this process of sensory motor distinction, this ability to use the forebrain, so that the brain is in this present moment in the process of making these distinctions. Mm-hmm. So that she, and you can't make distinctions and be emotionally overactive.
Mm-hmm.
The forebrain inhibits, it modulates the limbic system, the emotional system. It quiets the mind. It brings about, when you're really, really deeply investigating the very nature of the way that you act and move in the world, and you're really quiet in that, it brings about this other sense of composure that, in a sense, it's like the asking the Buddhist question, what was the nature of your original face before you were born? Now that's a good koan to ask. What's your face like before you acquired your demeanor through all of your experiences? What's it like if you're not maintaining the muscular habit of your face, your tension, your breath, your hands, your arms, the way between your legs, between your toes, between your fingers, and you actually have a sense of, this is profoundly me. Yeah.
Profoundly me.
And here I am in this moment. Yeah. Now I can watch myself arise to the bait of the environment. But if I really find the pleasure of being myself of a higher value than anything that's in the environment that would take me from that quality, I then can choose the quality. Yeah.
And choice seems to be the magic ingredient, it seems, within a lot of the work.
I mean, you don't have choice unless you can inhibit, and you know how to inhibit what is always the habit. The very first thing that simply you would do compulsively. It's not choice until you have 3 different ways to do something. It's primitive if all you have is right and wrong, or left and right, or good and bad. That's primitive, right? If you only have one way of doing something, that's compulsion. That's complete neurosis.
Yeah.
Your habits form and are carried out before you're even conscious of them taking place.
You have no adaptability within the environment, no other way of being. Yeah.
Right. It's the whole, if any of your people are watching Westworld, it's the whole Westworld Conundrum. Right. Here we have do you watch Westworld?
A little bit. I just started. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you have these computer programmed hosts who only have the behaviors that have been given to them through their but they begin to become conscious. They start to remember, and they remember all the previous events where they were killed and all the previous things, and they start to remember, and they've gone through this. It's like Groundhog Day, the movie Groundhog Day, over and over. But now, before long, somehow the program decays. They don't forget. They remember, and they remember that they remember. Yeah, and so they're seeking how to find their own ability to live their own life with their own consciousness. And there's a lot of religious metaphor and meditational metaphor that goes along in the whole thing when you start to really, again, watch what they're saying about how does a person begin to become free from compulsion. Yeah. And neurologically, do we actually have choice? Hell, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 30 seconds, the next 5 seconds. Do you? No. I mean, my nervous system is organized to orient itself. My nervous system is organized to anticipate changes in the environment. And I hope to God I have the greatest capacity to anticipate change in such a way that I'll have self-preservatory capabilities.
You want to have the best chance of getting by? Yeah. I
want to have the best chance that I can have. And that's a pretty deep biological function. Yeah? But I also want to have a sense that I have the ability to be with my own attitude, my own affect, the way that I acquired, the way my mind deals with and melds with my emotional self, and the way that I maintain my own particular, again, the best word I can come up with at this point in time is composure. Yeah.
That struck me from our first conversation, though, that it's a good word.
It's
not one I've heard often. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I really like it. It's something I've been using in the last couple of months, and as a way of really describing this integrated quality that people can have, where they're not hiding from themselves, or they're not afraid, or they're not maintaining some sort of self-protection or some compensation within themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a question. I mean, people. It's a very modern question. It's an age-old modern question. I mean, it's the question the Buddha asked. I mean, basically, I mean, who am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's ultimately the question. I mean, am I a prince? Am I that which I acquired through the way I internalized myself in the world? Is that who I am? What would it be? The koan is simply, first there is a mountain, then no mountain, then there is. Mm-hmm. First there's the life of being conditioned, then there's the moment of being aware of my conditioning. So a moment of unadulterated, a sense of opening into a sense of, I'm not engaged by the world in the way that I'm historically been engaged by the world. It's a particular kind of crucifixion where I'm not bound by my habit. There's a particular dying to. It's not easy, and it's extraordinarily painful to the way that we acquired a sense of ourselves. My acquired mind goes
of a lot.
Exactly.
Maybe your entire conception of yourself.
Exactly. And then, of course, once you've acquired this or come to this new way of being aware of yourself, then you still have to live in the world. But you're living
that, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you don't. I mean, you can always ascend.
Well, yeah, you could opt out. That's true.
and take your body with you when you go.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the things that I think that are worth investigating. And the question is there really truly an approach that's adaptable, that's more convenient, more expedient, more concrete than some of the other processes? And I would say yes. I mean, I mean, Freud himself said, and Freud was a neurologist, Freud said, psychoanalysis will become obsolete as we understand more about neurology. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of what we're doing today in the Feldenkrais method is Moshe wrote about 60, 70 years ago. I was at an event last week. Moshe Feldenkrais and Ida Rolf had these really long discussions about function and structure. Mm-hmm. So my son plays basketball in AAU basketball, and his team and an older team, of older age kids, they went down to Houston for a tournament. Some of the kids on the older team got injured, and a mother who wants to help with injury prevention. So she makes arrangements to have a group of people come into to talk to the players and the parents about injury prevention. Mm-hmm. Now, the particular model that of injury prevention is really outdated, but it's very, very current today, which is to have people rolling on foam rollers to create fascial, to change the fascial strain, to the fascial habits. And if the fascia is released, then the musculature then is freer to move. Mm-hmm. That's Moshe Feldenkrais and Ida Rolf arguing in 1970. It's the exact same argument.
Uh-huh. Does a change in structure represent a change in function, or Exactly.
Does it lead, the question, of course, is, does it lead to a change in the ability to motor plan?
Yeah.
No way.
At least we haven't found a good mechanism for it yet.
Well, this group offers guarantees that they were talking about. There was one kid in a boot from a sprained ankle, and they say, well, we can get you out of the boot, but it'll be horrifically painful.
Well, yeah, you can get someone out of a cast and
Right.
you just cut it off.
Right, and their demonstration was that, they had the kids lean over as if to touch their toes, have them roll themselves on the rollers, and then find out if it's different than how they lean over to touch their toes.
Yeah.
As a demonstration for the sense of, well, are they? And this is the question: are they more flexible? And is flexibility and mobility, are they the same thing?
Yeah, and is this a long-term change, or is this, they've experienced a stimulus twice and they know how to...
Well, do I need to roll myself on the roller every goddamn day of my life?
You mean you don't? What the hell, Jeff?
The thing that I enjoy about the Feldenkrais method is that there is absolutely never, ever the same thing. Even if we do the same lesson 5 times in a row, it's not the same thing.
No
I can't
compulsive routine to go through, and
every single time requires an attention to details, and that because I'm paying attention to details, I can find attention to details that will take me further and further and further into the refinement within the details.
Mm-hmm.
So that my own sense of refinement. I mean, what good would it be to be a wine taster or a chef, a master chef, if after 10 years of cooking, my palate stays the same?
Yeah.
Why would I continue to be a wine taster if I can't, at 15 years and 20 years and 30 years, keep finding more and more subtle differences and my palate become more exquisite? Mm-hmm. So why shouldn't this moment of living, the way that I see the yellow in the weeds that are in my backyard,
why can't you more exquisitely see the weeds in the yard? Yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, I love it when I'm working. I have a really, really a lovely place to work, and I can see outside into the screen space. Mm-hmm. And I love it. In some moments I'll look up and there'll be a light coming through, and there'll be a particular hues and shades and shadows and things, and I'll be completely entranced by I'm going to turn this completely off. So sorry, I don't like to.
No problem. Well, it just seems that we've got this whole sensory array around us. I mean, all of our 5 primary senses and this internal experience, and we can't consciously compute all of that. So there's so much opportunity to experience a little bit more and a little bit more, and a new flavor and a new taste.
Well, and we're conditioned in what we take in, and we have predisposition towards some more than others.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's all fascinating, and it's all fun, and it's by far, this process is the most concrete way into a profound sense of the pleasure of living. Mm-hmm. Feldenkrais used to come around to me when I was training with him. Mm-hmm. And he'd kick me in the toe and he'd say, "I take better care of you than you can take care of yourself." Now, he was 78, 79 years old at the time. He was a little round, he was short, he had cataracts in one eye, he nimbly moved around, he did remarkable things with himself. But I kept, here I was a black belt, I was a PhD, I was this and that, and there's no way that you can take better care of me than I can take care of myself. I was just this 32-year-old or 30-year-old. I think I was about 30 at the time when I started the training. I was just like, kind of full of myself. And I mean, I'd played university basketball. I was a good athlete. I could, at that point in time, someone would say, let's go. I'm running a marathon. I say, great. I'll run it with you. When is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. 3 weeks. Oh, perfect. I got enough time to train for that. I can do that. Well, I'm running 5 to 8 miles a day. I'm doing 5 hours of Aikido a day, and in relationship to the other things I'm doing, it's just a matter of changing my training for a couple of weeks, and it's just turn my attention somewhere else.
Yeah, you might not qualify for one of the tops, but you'll get through. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to be running under 4 hours, and I ran it in 3 hours and 56 minutes. I thought that was pretty decent.
There you go. Pretty decent.
Of course, what was really bizarre about the damn thing is that I hadn't even gone over this finish line 100 yards before I'm thinking, gee, my cousin Greg was the first winner of the triathlon, the Ironman in Hawaii. I'm going to go up to his place and start training with him so I can be a triathlete. And fortunately for me, I had the presence of mind to catch myself doing something as silly as that, even though, I mean, for me, I was really lucky that I didn't have that. Mm-hmm. But that was exactly the point that Feldenkrais said. I take better care of you than you can take care of yourself. I knew at least to preserve my life so I didn't become completely compulsive about training. But when I came back from my Feldenkrais training, I rented a 9,000 square foot building here in Seattle, and we had classes in Aikido, Tai Chi, yoga, awareness through movement, judo. Mm-hmm. I held a Feldenkrais training program in the space. There were 4 practitioners. I administered the building. I gave 35 individual lessons a week, taught 7 to 10 classes a week, and absolutely destroyed 2 relationships.
Yeah.
So in other words, I didn't know anything about taking care of myself.
Well, yeah, it depends on what you conceive the self. Physically, you were probably great. And
well, what I was really good at was doing a lot in order to give myself a sense that I was important. Right? I was really, really good at producing all of this stuff because it was the greatest way I knew to cover my insecurity. Yeah. The same force that drove me, the neurosis that drove me, that took me into the ability to do these things, eventually it had to be dealt with because I still didn't know how to care for myself. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You push until you can't push anymore, and when you can't push anymore, something
usually breaks. Yeah. Something breaks, and it's an ulcer, or it's a hemorrhage.
A relationship. Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, something goes, and it's usually always at the point of trying to cover up emotional pain, deep insecurity, profound existential fear, whatever it is. We're doing something to keep ourselves from experiencing what we most don't want to experience, and we'll kill ourselves to keep ourselves from experiencing what we don't want to experience. So that's a conundrum.
Yeah.
And so how do we learn to be kind with ourselves? And that question, I mean, the very nature of the awareness to movement process asks you to learn to be kind with yourself. Mm. To start out
into effort, not pushing into strength. Yeah.
To find out through your own ability to discriminate, to find out how to initiate movement in such a way that the movement is done with the least amount of harm to yourself, the least amount of effort, the minimal amount of tone that you need to produce the movement so that you're not maintaining a historic tension within yourself.
Not simply perpetuating what has happened.
Right. Yeah. So you have a contrast for yourself. And then after a little while, you can ask yourself, has the quality of my life improved? Mm-hmm. That's the question, isn't it? Yeah. What's the quality I want to live my life with? Yeah. Now, I'm how old am I? I'll be 69 in September. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a few more years on myself from which to have escaped the tyranny of my massive testosterone levels or whatever. But it was a truism that I never could understand. But both the founder of Aikido, Morihei Ueshiba, and Feldenkrais are on the record of saying, I didn't master my art until I lost my personal strength. Yeah. My physical strength. I didn't master my art until the physical strength that I relied on wasn't available to me.
And then you have to learn.
Then you have to learn. Then you can't use the strength in lieu of the subtlety of what's possible. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. An error of an inch is equal to an error of 1,000 miles.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are profound conundrums for us as human beings to wrestle with.
Yeah.
And then the question for me is to look really care. Let me look for the moment at my life. Let me look at my life here and see where my life is going. And I can see the tenure of my life. Is it taking me in a steep slope into my life, into my grave? Is it a long, gentle slope? Am I killing myself with my will?
Mm-hmm.
Is my life truly comfortable? Am I really, really enjoying the quality of what it is to be with myself? Or can I not stand to be with myself? So I'm hiding myself in some form of narcotization, either some drug or some drink or some alcohol or some person or some group or some activity. Mm-hmm. Can I actually just find being with myself a pleasant experience? And if I can't, what do I need to do to create a trajectory that opposes my curve?
How do I change the direction that this is?
How do I mediate the curve? I have to be in a learning trajectory if I'm going to mediate this curve. I have to learn something that I don't know. It has to take me someplace that I've never been before. Absolutely must take me out of what I've known. Mm-hmm. And I have to be careful that when I'm on this curve, that I'm not trying to produce this curve by what I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Well, shoot. I mean, I know I've kept you a little over, I think. I don't know how much time we actually had, but so there are Feldenkrais practitioners all over the world, but I'm curious, could you share a little bit about the Feldenkrais Training Academy that you're putting together? Because it's...
Man. In general, a Feldenkrais training is given over 4 years of time. 800 hours of training, 200 hours a year for 4 years. In general, the training takes place in such a way that you spend 2 years learning the groundwork called awareness through movement, and then after that, what you do is you have a one supervised lesson of what we call awareness through movement. And that if you so to speak pass this exam that almost everybody passes, then you become authorized to teach awareness through movement to people in the public. Mm-hmm. Through the Feldenkrais Guild. All of our training programs are certified. You have to be a certified trainer by the Feldenkrais Guild that joins with all the other guilds in the world, so that every training has, if you graduate from a training, you're a practitioner anywhere in the world.
Anywhere, yeah.
So the second 2 years is generally the practice of functional integration, the hands-on work. And you're going to link.
I'll link into that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can give a couple links of some lessons off the YouTube. Mm-hmm. People can just look me up, Jeff Haller and Dorothy, and they can watch me work with a ballerina who broke her foot horrifically and is trying to recover her ability to stand on the foot that's been broken. Mm-hmm. So that's and at the end of that session, you do 2 lessons with someone from the public and supervised lessons, and you graduate as a Feldenkrais practitioner. By becoming a graduate of any Feldenkrais practitioner, then you automatically be certified to be a member of the guild. That's wherever it is that you live. Whether this broadcast might not just be in North America, you could be going to people in Europe or wherever. Yeah. So it depends on what country you're living in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In general, it gives you the right to the terms. The Feldenkrais method of somatic education to be a certified Feldenkrais practitioner. These are terms that are owned by the Feldenkrais Guild, and the right to use the terms functional integration and awareness through movement. Mm-hmm. So as a practitioner of the Feldenkrais method, that means that you've been through a certified training. Yeah. And you've graduated. Now, I don't think that that's a high enough professional standard for the people that graduate from Feldenkrais trainings, myself. And so I've created a far more rigorous and stringent program and just for, I'm going to just share the screen for a moment, and I'll just put up the.
Yeah. And I'll link into this as well, because it's really worth taking a look at.
anybody who's looking for a profession, you're an injured yoga teacher, you're a massage therapist who's come to the end of your rope and really want something that provides a different way of working with people, a physical therapist, or you're a parkour player, and you realize that in 15 years you're going to need to you need to do something else.
You're going to want to move. Yeah.
You're going to want to move, and you may want to be in the place where you're really, really profoundly helping people with the quality of their life and the quality of their movement and the quality of their emotional dignity and the quality of their health. Mm-hmm. So anyway, here's the academy. Chandler will link you guys into that. But
I'll link into it. Yeah.
So this program has taken me about 5 years to build. It took a year for the Feldenkrais Guild to actually come up with a policy to accept a pilot program that doesn't follow the normal standard. And the standard is that I have the main standard that's different is that people, when partway through the training program, when they have to do a minimum of 50 documented ATM lessons before they can even apply for their practicum. They have to be able to show that they're competent beginning practitioners before we're going to authorize them to go out into the public and work.
I'm no math wizard, but that's order of magnitude more than the standard trainings.
Right. They ask for 1. We're going to ask for 50 just to qualify. They're going to ask for 1 to graduate. I'm going to ask you to have documented a minimum of 100 lessons, to know 30 lessons offhand that you can teach when there are 1,000 lessons that are available to you.
And these are not short lessons. For anyone who hasn't done a lesson, these are involved.
They're 35 minutes to an hour to pursue a lesson, this level of studying function. Mm-hmm. And to have taught a one-day themed workshop in order to graduate. And then in the world of functional integration, the hands-on, the individual work, that's you have to have done 50 FI lessons before you apply for your practicum. You have to pass your practicum, which again will be a relatively stringent examination of your competence. And then have done 100 lessons that you've documented before you graduate. Now, this course, and we have a couple of other things. I actually have a director of self-assessment, a woman who's going to help people explore their competence, to look at the areas that you're strong in, and then to look at the areas that you most need to develop yourself in and develop lesson plans that will help you, that you'll actually use to improve the areas that you're weakest in. Because everybody's going to come in with proclivities for what they do well and other areas that they most need to develop themselves in. We want a whole practitioner, a person who's just as comfortable in front of a group of people as they are working with a single person. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that may be your practice, but we're asking for that. Now, and I just got lost in all that.
So quality control is an important thing.
Right. But the other thing is that no program has ever really taken, from the day one that you start into the process, we're going to help you build your business. We have a person in the program who will take you through a process that you'll build your own business plan and begin to institute your own business before you graduate. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to graduate from the program anxious about your capability to work and anxious about your ability to go into the public and begin a practice. Now, that's the general trend in most Feldenkrais trainings, is that because the work can be so nebulous. Even just to describe the method as we spoke about today or in the beginning,
we had to have a story to put it in perspective. Yeah.
Right. We had to create a context, because you can't say what the method is, because you can't just say, well, it's a process by which one acquires increased neuroplasticity. That's not good enough.
No, it doesn't have as much emotional zhuzh with it.
Exactly.
I love it.
I talk too fast?
No. We hopped on a call before, and just like lights are clicking. This is, from my outside perspective too, exactly what the method needs in order to reach what it could be.
There's a huge legacy of material that needs to be brought into the public. The view of the method needs to be continually transformed. And we need to have bright and vibrant people who wanted to be on a cutting edge place where they're bringing this method into the public in a way where they recognize that they're not just working with a person's physical integrity, but they're working to help the person transform the quality of their life, to transcend the gravitational influence that they've been adapted to. Yeah. To actually bring themselves into a new orbit outside of their historic gravitational field, and then have the personal means to keep the orbit rather than have the orbit decay back into their conditioning. Now that's health. That's someone who's moving up into the stream of life in such a way that they can handle the vagaries of life with a real collected sense of themselves.
Yeah.
And to have the means to adapt to the world, to really know how to study yourself and know how to adapt. I mean, it's really an unfortunate thing. I sit 6 to 7 hours a day with the public that comes to me. In order for me to be effective, I have to be able to sense to the highest degree of sensing with my hands the habits that people maintain, the patterns that they maintain, to sense them and to provide their nervous tissue a reflection so that they can find a new answer within themselves. And in order to do that, I have to be profoundly peaceful within myself. I get paid for being peaceful. It's a horrific job. Someone has to do it. And it may as well be me. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
And every day I have the time to explore. I can go through Feldenkrais's old materials. I can go through the materials that he taught that I've been through several times before, and find new phrases, new phraseology, new reference within the movement, within the process, so that my own ability to discriminate continues to get higher and higher. In other words, it's like if you've ever been to an examination for the first degree black belt in judo or aikido or any of the martial arts, if you ever watched one of these demonstrations, so that the person is demonstrating proficiency at a beginning level in that art. Yeah, you're not a beginner until you're a black belt. It means you have the means from which to study the art when you're a black belt. Everything else is preparatory to getting to the place of starting the art. Yeah. And so, but if you've ever seen the difference between a first degree and a second degree black belt test, it's huge on an order of magnitude of difference. That's huge. And then you go to a third degree black belt and fourth degree black belt. Now there's no reason for us not to imagine what it would be like to be a fifth, sixth, or seventh degree black belt in the art of listening to yourself while you take an awareness to movement lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time we go through a lesson, the level of refinement, it's like I can't even figure out where my right hand and my left hand are.
Might not have a right and left side, yeah.
You might not, and it's certainly not going to be very well refined. I don't know what to look for. But after a few years, I notice the distinctions.
Yeah. You just perpetually unfold the deeper you dive into this, and there's more and more.
Let me give you the best description of the Feldenkrais method I could give you. Have everybody look up and read "Cutting Up an Ox" by Thomas Merton. Okay. It's a rendering of the poetry of Chuang Tzu. And so it's Thomas Merton's edition of the teachings of Chuang Tzu. Okay. And it's called "Cutting Up an Ox." And so it's the story of a cook relative to the emperor. Yeah, and the cook is cutting up an ox, and he talks about how how at first the ox, all he could see was one mass, but eventually he sees the distinctions. And he gets to the point where he can use the same cleaver 19 years because he doesn't stop. He doesn't cut. He doesn't hack. He senses his way through the tough joints. Now that's the art. That's following the Tao. That's following the internal river of becoming more and more discrete, higher levels of discrimination. Now, I mean, it's all through the literature, these processes. Now, how can we be in a process and live in that process?
That's the question.
That's the question. Yeah. Wow. That's where I think human vitality is at its highest. At its highest is when we're right on the edge of that discovery, right at the edge of the paradigm between falling into my historic gravitational field or being in the paradigm in which I'm aware of my historic gravitational field, and it's a resource from which I can live my life forward, as opposed to being unconsciously driven by it.
Yeah,
that's the human question for me. That's the edge. That's where the joy of the work, the joy of living, begins to appear and emerge.
That's a lot. That seems like a good place to jump off.
Yeah, well, wasn't this? I hope this was. I had fun with this. I hope I
had fun. Yeah. Oh yeah. And so we're going to put a lot of stuff into the show notes, and I just want to say, Jeff, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, I really appreciate having a chance to talk to you and your viewers, and if anybody wants to contact me, that's very easy. Just right through the Feldenkrais Training Academy.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. I'm around. I'm happy to answer your questions and hang out.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you.